Delighted to say joining us this morning are Jacob Sackhill, who's an activist, youth and community strategist. Also, Sophia Worringer, political commentator, joins us this morning. Good morning to the two of you.
Good morning. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. And it's your first time here.
It is my first time. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for coming in. Lovely to see you as well, Sophia. Shall we start with the first talking point? Because it's in all the papers pretty much. The Sunday Telegraph this morning, here it is. The Sunday Telegraph leads with this story. Hostile states are using migration to destabilise the West. Hostile states, he says, are increasingly driving people to our shores to destabilise Western nations unless leaders crack down on illegal migration and revamp asylum conventions. This is the speech he gave. He's now best buddies with Meloni. He's now in Italy. He said insufficient action would lead to growing numbers that will overwhelm our countries and our capacity to help those who need our help most. Now, he was speaking at a festival hosted by Meloni's Populist Brothers of Italy party in Rome. This is an attempt, in my opinion, to try and pull the Conservative Party back together. I was saying earlier on, it's really 5 parties under one mantra. We now know in some ways his illegal migrant policy is sort of working vaguely. The numbers are vaguely down, but at the same time 292 migrants came across on Friday. The weather's terrible. They came across on Friday and very sadly someone died after that journey to the UK. Has Rishi Sunak suddenly had a personality transplant? What's going on here? Were you surprised by that headline?
I think this is just someone struggling to breathe. In my opinion, I think as long as I've been alive, and it's only been short 30 years, I think people are always trying to travel to other countries. And for me, I find it extremely clickbait. Trying to prepare for an election that I think he's going to struggle. And it's a simplistic way of looking at things. And his audience, clearly, he's just trying to pander to what they might want to hear.
What do you make of the fact that he's cozying up with Meloni as well? I think this is fascinating.
I find it extremely uncomfortable. And I think really he's putting himself in a position where when we have the general election, he has a position that people are not necessarily used to and wouldn't think he would take that space that he hasn't taken before. So I find it extremely uncomfortable, but I'm not surprised given the political climate at the moment.
Why are you uncomfortable?
Because he's supposed to be representing everyone in this country. He's our prime minister. And for me, politics aside, you should have someone who knows exactly what this country needs and think about everyone on, no matter where they come from. And for me, it kind of makes it a bit more polarizing, makes you uncomfortable. I wasn't born in this country personally,
right? And
I came here at the age of 11.
But you came here legally.
Yeah, that's it. That's true.
There's a big difference between legal migration and illegal migration.
I totally agree, but I think at the same time we have to ask ourselves that question: who do we want to be as a country? What are our values? If people are coming to this country, how do we ensure that they are productive and they benefit from our society and we benefit from them in terms of what they can offer? So I understand the argument about illegal and legal, but I think we need to push the conversation a bit further than that.
Sophia, what is Rishi Sunak playing at here? Because, look, we've been talking about this all morning. The fact is immigration is a huge issue as we come into the general election. People are absolutely livid at what they're seeing in their hometowns. You've seen it where you're from, hotels being taken over, the decimation of town centres. And we're talking really about a very small number here, 44,000 last year. But people, Charlie made a brilliant point. It's a sense of unfairness. That if you get on a boat, somehow you're allowed into this country and given a bed for 200 quid a night. If you come here legally, it's very difficult to do that for a start, but also you don't get any of those perks. It's got to change.
And I think you're completely correct, and the Prime Minister is right to make this a key priority, and he knows that his premiership kind of stands or falls on his ability to deliver his promises to cut both illegal and legal migration. And I think the reason why he's going to Italy and why he's becoming best friends now with the Italian Prime Minister is because he realises that she is seen as a premier that is taking this issue seriously, and he wants to align himself with her so that he can be seen by the right of his party as taking this issue seriously. And it's interesting, in this country we always call Meloni a far-right leader, but in her own country she's called a centre-right, or at least the party is talked about as a centre-right.
But it depends which publication you read. So I was reading The Guardian, she's far-right, Rishi Sunak cozying up with the far-right. If you read some of the right-leaning newspapers, she's not far-right. So it's in the interpretation, isn't it?
Exactly, but I do think that she is being strong on migration and people like that. It's obviously why she got elected. She rode in on that wave, and I do think that the Prime Minister is trying to glean some of her success and try and learn from her, but also position himself next to her so that he can be seen as someone who's taking migration seriously.
So this is the other thing that's fascinating about this for me, is that she said that she took inspiration. I mean, they're very close, aren't they? They're both of a similar age. Weirdly, they enjoy the same sort of science fiction kind of stuff. They have shared interests. They're bezzers. But she said she took inspiration from his Rwanda policy. He's taking inspiration from her offshore processing. Italy has a huge problem. They've set up 2 offshore migrant processing centres in Albania. No migrant. So what's different to them? No migrant goes to Italy, but they go to Albania. They are processed. They can claim asylum. But they have 127,000 illegal migrants when you look at what we have had, which is 44,000. This is a problem across Europe, and Suella Braverman is right. If you've got 850 million people on the move across Europe, no country in Europe can sustain that amount of migration.
I think for me, it's like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and he's calling a friend and he's trying to get the support as much as he can. I think we have to ask ourselves a question. As a country, we know immigration is always going to be part of our most serious agenda, but at the same time, it just shows the ineffectiveness over the last, 20, 30 years at least. It's really about the Conservative Party asking themselves the question, how did they get their house in order as a government? And they had enough time to do it.
So let me just ask you this. What does the Labour Party do? What does it do? I have no idea what Keir Starmer thinks on illegal immigration.
I would like to ask that same question. As far as I'm concerned, when I see the likes of Harriet Harman in Parliament and I hear conversations from the Labour Party and what they're saying, I wouldn't say for a second that they don't have a clue, but I'm tired. I think for most of my adult life, being on a Conservative government has caused me to ask the question, what does an effective government looks like? And I'm thinking about that on a local level. So yes, we can talk about immigration, but the reality is, on a day-to-day life, if you're living in this country, it is a struggle.
I agree.
And part of that struggle, I think, is that the lower end of wages has been suppressed by the huge influx of some of this is legal migration, the majority of. So it does impact people on the day-to-day basis, this migration debate. But also on Labour's policy, unfortunately, I think Labour's policy is still very vague. They have said that they will use the powers under the Act of tackling terrorism to tackle migration. Who knows what that actually means? And there's no meat on that bones, and the people want to understand what that policy will actually look like.
And this goes back to your point, Charlie, about aspiration for young people, because actually you feel there's nothing out there for you. So there's a huge amount of disenfranchisement going on in terms of migration. That is a brilliant point, though, because the shortage occupation list, that is welcome news to me, that they're moving from 27,000 up to 38,000. We have been far too reliant on cheap labour for far too long. You've got 8.7 million people not employed, not in training, that need jobs, that need to be paid properly to get jobs in this country.
Absolutely, and the government have been too long, all governments of all stripes have been too reliant on pulling the lever of migration to fill the need of jobs in this country. And turning off that tap will force them to upskill people who are already here. And as you've said, the welfare bill is rising. It's rose under the Conservative and the Labour government. It's even risen so much since the pandemic, and the cohort of people that is rising the most is those who are economically inactive, so they're not even having to search for work. But if we are having to turn off the tap of migration, whether it's legal or illegal migration, we can have more focus on the people in this country who need to be in work.
I mean, it's really fascinating. Rwanda is this big thing, obviously. The big plan from Rishi Sunak. What they've done is they've said, right, we're going to, the illegal migration bill says Rwanda is safe with notwithstanding clauses. They're ignoring the Human Rights Act. We don't leave the ECHR. Wait for this, Charlie. The Conservative Party don't seem to be very organised, because the Home Office has no aircraft to send anyone to Rwanda, even if this goes through, according to the Times this morning. Even if they do that, and the reason for that is airlines have refused to sign contracts with the Home Office because they fear reputational damage from the policy. We now know the airfield earmarked for deportation flights is Boscombe Down, near Salisbury in Wiltshire. Wait for this, it gets worse. It's not even ready. So it needs millions of pounds to upgrade its fencing and security systems. It's cost 300 million quid. No one's been. 3 Home Secretaries have been. It's 100 million quid per Home Secretary. That's not a great use of money.
It doesn't sound particularly like a good use of money, but I'm sure, and I'm not going to discredit the Times in any way.
I should hope
it's
not.
a brilliant newspaper. But I think that might have just been one particular plan at one particular moment in time. I would stress that, people will know that there was a plane on the tarmac ready to go before lawyers intervened to prevent a plane. So it is the case
We
that
saw the live images of it not moving.
So it is the case that there had been a plane available. I'm sure there will be alternative air carriers that will be able to take those flights, and alternative airports. So that might be that case that you just mentioned, but there will be an alternative.
Let's come back to you. Well, go on.
Yeah, for me, it's really interesting where the money comes from. We talk about this country and we say the economy is an issue. The government doesn't have any money, yet there's loads of money when we're talking about sending people to Rwanda. I think when we talk about our education system, I think that's a better way of addressing the issue around immigration. It's so easy to be polarizing around whether people should come in and how they should come into this country. We should be thinking about our young generation. How are they getting employed? How do they know about what aspirations look like? Some of our young people don't even know about the career prospects that exist.
But aren't they linked? So let's go back to your story, which is we're sort of distracted by illegal migration, which I think everyone agrees we need to get on top of. But legal migration, you cannot have the numbers that are coming in, 750,000 people coming into this country per year, just in terms of just the numbers of people coming in terms of infrastructure. And that links back to young people in this country. If you're bringing in cheap labour, and if you're letting any old Tom, Dick and Harry into this country, who then bring relatives, which is another issue, the future looks really bleak if you're born in this country.
For me, I have dual citizenship as an American, also as a Brit.
I'm so sorry, you're an American.
Sometimes I forget until I go back to the States. But what I would say is I think if you're thinking about young people, if you're thinking about our education system and employment, you have to then get to a position where you're saying, actually, if people are coming to this country, they're not going to be the first choice because you didn't have a workforce that is ready and that's engaging. And at the moment, we don't have that.
Do you think the States is more aspirational for young people?
I think it exists in theory at the very least. So you have this idea that it's possible. And I feel like that's lost here. We talk about Christmas. Everyone gets quite excited around this time. I think we need that energy here in this country when it comes to the future.
Well, that was the whole point of levelling up the UK. So
you and Michael Gove, you're very close.
Going back to, well, it's true. So there's communities that felt overlooked and undervalued, and making sure that having voted to leave the EU, you wanted more opportunities.
How's it going?
Local,
how's levelling up going?
Well, it's it's going, and look, you're absolutely right, because there is a circle here. It's an never-ending circle of investment. You want investment in education, you want investment in opportunity, but it's about fairness. But if you've got the thousands of people that still come into the country illegally, we talked about that $6 million a day bill on hotel costs. That could be better spent on education.
People see the numbers,
but you've got to stop those numbers, and the only reason you stop those numbers is having a deterrent in place, which is like Rwanda, which I know is costly and expensive, but it's only when you get that off the ground, if you can put it like that, and you stop those numbers coming in, you then have more money in the long term to invest in education and skills and opportunities right across the country.
The deterrent is actually a productive country where people work and people have an opportunity to get to their aspirations.
No, because then they'll want to come here even more.
Yes. I disagree on that.
So just if you were advising the government in terms of optics and how they reset, and after the break we'll come back to what each party needs to do. But in terms of this immigration, is Rishi Sunak right to keep chasing Rwanda down the rabbit hole, the increasingly expensive rabbit hole?
He needs to do something, and Rwanda is the plan that has had the most money and time put into its creation, and so he's hoping that this will be the thing, as you said, that creates the deterrent. I know that the Home Secretary has talked about other plans that are in train, which he hasn't spoken about publicly as to what they are, but he says there are other options, and I presume that if Rwanda doesn't happen, they will move to those other options. So I do think this deterrent factor is absolutely key, because the pull factor, as you said, is really strong for people to want to come here. And as you said, the numbers that are coming across the channel and losing their lives, that's awful. We have to remember how dangerous it is, and we need to put that deterrent in place.
For you, very quickly, did the illegal migration bill go far enough in terms of, I mean, it was broad principles. At the second reading, really, it shouldn't have struggled to get through at all. It's really only just agreeing principles. Jenrick has tabled 2 amendments. Does it need to be toughened? I
think that's the whole point of bills going through Parliament, is it? That you have the time to debate it and, as you said, to amend it and to strengthen and to clarify things as they go. Those who voted against it, or those who abstained, wanted to tank the bill completely, which would remove the opportunities for debate. So as it goes through Parliament, there'll be things that need to be clarified.
Super. Thank you for the moment, Jacob, Sophia, and of course my little elf friend as well. Thank you very much. Let's take a break. After the break, more from these three. This is Talk TV this morning. Well, let's go back to our panel. Jacob Sackle, who's an activist, youth and community strategist, is here. Also, Sophia Worringer, who is a political commentator. Really good to see both of you. Thank you very much indeed for a feisty start. Let's move on just in terms of where we are in the general election cycle. You know, Charlie thinks that the Conservative Party can still win, don't you?
Of course, yes, I do. Yes.
Can the Conservative Party win? I mean, what's fascinating, and this is an article in the Telegraph this morning, is that Downing Street needs to wake up to the fact that Conservatives are being outflanked on the right by Sir Keir Starmer's Labour Party. This is Steve Baker. He says Keir Starmer has moved so far to the right, they are now to the right of the Conservative Party, and I tend to agree.
I think it's good to dream. So in terms of the Conservatives winning the general election, but you know, you got to start somewhere. But what I would say in terms of Labour Party,
I'm an eternal optimist. That's my.
It's good to start somewhere. But what I would say in terms of the Labour Party, there is that argument they're moving to the right. It does cause some concern. I think for me, in terms of a political view, we have to realise that everyone is feeling something that needs to happen in this country, and I'm hoping that the Labour Party provides that in terms of an option for government. I want adults in government. I want adults.
And you think the Labour Party are adults?
I think they're much more better than the other guys are on the other side.
Right, but of course many other parties are available as well. You
that
don't
is
have
true.
To just vote
that
for
is
those
true.
two. I'm just, you know, just making a point.
Quite.
No, it's a really
You are quite right.
It's a valid point.
Minor parties are available.
No, I'm not having that. And also, I've got the latest polling here, by the way. This was done by the Times and YouGov. Conservatives 22%, Labour 44%, Third Reform UK 11%, Lib Dems on 10%, Greens on 7%. It's really fascinating, this, Sophia. So we've seen this before, where the Labour Party, under Blair, of course, became more right of centre, became electable. Also, Keir Starmer now invoking Thatcher. I never thought I'd see it.
I know, I didn't either. And I'm not sure that really played to his strengths, because I think it's added to the vision of him saying what the public want to hear and trying to say things that are expedient rather than things that he believes in. So I'm not sure the Thatcher thing fully worked. But I mean, it's an overall clever strategy from the Labour Party to try and neutralise the points of disagreement with the Conservatives. Things like migration, which they know poll highly and that people really care about. Things like the NHS, which previously the Labour Party have said have been untouchable, but now they're saying we do need to reform it. That is something that the Conservative parties have failed to do.
And use private
Exactly,
medicine.
which was brought in under the Labour government and initially, bringing in more of that. So I do think that is interesting, but I think the problem is that the Labour Party, what they say in the campaign, will be very different from what they say if they get into government.
And would you agree with that, what they're saying? I mean, I think the way for Labour to win this is not to say anything at the moment.
I think they need to keep quiet as long as they can, and they'll have a higher chance of not dividing the vote and actually winning the general election. I think when we talk about the NHS, it's something that feels like it's supposed to be untouchable, but it needs to work, and it needs to work for everyone. At the same time, it makes me extremely uncomfortable about private healthcare and the idea of that, you know, you have companies.
Why are you uncomfortable? Hang on a minute.
GPs, a lot of them are private healthcare. You don't understand
so
how they
GPs, remember, are not contracted by the NHS. They are private providers underneath the umbrella of the NHS. And why do you have a problem? If it remains free at the point of need, which is the whole point of the Bevan principle, why are you worried about who provides those services?
Well, coming from a country where people are routinely denied healthcare in the US,
indeed,
and living in this country, we take for granted
but
that
that's
reality.
because it's an entirely different system, which is a private system where you, as you know, you have to pay a lot of money to have that private healthcare.
But once you open the door doesn't close.
No, but the door's been open for a long time, and there's no way we're going to go to the American healthcare system. And I think it's really disappointing when people put the only two options are NHS or American style. We know across Europe there's a whole suite of healthcare systems that do not fall into each of those categories and have far better outcomes than the NHS.
There needs to be better standards, and as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't go with companies who are private taking over the NHS, and it is seen that way because we know there's money there.
Let me throw something back at you, which is actually, when you look at private provision to the NHS, it's far more efficient. They get through far more operations. I've worked in both systems. The NHS is bureaucratic, it's slow, nothing is done at a pace. If you have private provision as part of of that NHS contract, it's in your interest to make sure you get throughput of patients so that people are seen. And actually, in many senses, the delivery is faster and better.
But David, why don't we talk about the culture? Why don't we get that culture that you have in that competitive space in private companies who know how to be efficient and make that work in the NHS? I think it's about culture, and it's about us making sure the management system changes.
Isn't the issue it's too big?
Yeah. Well, it's the people. I think
it's too big.
System.
I mean, it's the third largest organisation behind the Chinese National Army and the Indian Railway.
But as far as I'm concerned, it's something to be proud of. It's something that has saved a lot of lives, and it's something that makes us different from the rest of the world. We just need to be more efficient in how we work.
But our outcomes are terrible.
The only way we can get that culture which you speak of, that you say you need, is by putting pressure on the bottom line so that there's more of a finance-driven incentive to get through patients.
I don't think it's about raising competition. I have to disagree with you on that one. But what I would say is it needs to change. We love the NHS, and it's not about being nostalgic about what it used to be. It has to be fit for this time where we're living in at the moment.
OK, let's move on to the biggest story of the day, I think, and that is Eurovision, which is taking place in May. Apparently, Ollie Alexander is representing the United Kingdom. It is being held in Sweden this year. Of course, he was the former Years and Years frontman, and he's hoping to improve our disappointing performance on last year. He says, I love Eurovision so much, it's a dream come true. I really can't believe I'm going to be part of such a special legacy and fly the flag for the UK in the gayest way possible. We did very badly last year, I seem to recall. We came second to last. And this is actually quite interesting, because certainly in the Brexit years, the Europeans really hated us, so we got no points at all. Are you hopeful for Eurovision? Do you think that actually... I think it's a good, interesting choice.
Yeah, I mean, good luck to him. I think it will be great if we could move up the rankings for next year. But I do think, as you said, even though Brexit is in the distance, I still think a lot of the votes are political. So we'll have to see if we actually base it on talent rather than politics.
I assume you're familiar with Eurovision.
David, I have a confession. I am familiar with Eurovision, but I don't watch it unless we win. I think we'll get in the top 5. I think I'll start watching. I'll be rooting for the UK.
Yeah, well, I imagine you like a bit of Eurovision.
I do, actually. Yes. You wouldn't be surprised to know I do tune in occasionally, but I do think this is a bit of a risk, actually, because
Why?
he is such a well-known... He's a great selling artist in his own right, internationally acclaimed. So the idea that he could then come second to bottom is not very good, I would have thought, for his reputation.
Well,
but I wish him all the best.
Who do you think has won the most? Which country?
Sweden?
Very good.
Yeah,
So it's joint first, actually. It's Sweden and Ireland.
They're quite great at it, actually,
joint first.
so.
Do you know, it is the largest live event, as far as I'm aware, in the world, if not behind Super Bowl or about the same as Super Bowl. I mean, the number of people, and in Europe it's celebrated enormously. It's an absolutely huge festival. Look, I think this is post-Brexit Britain. I think we can stand out and be proud, and hopefully we'll win, and that would be great for the economy. Wouldn't it?
Would be. And let's not forget, Liverpool hosted it last time and it was an absolute success. It's where I'm from. Always want to fly the flag.
Everything's always successful in Liverpool.
Exactly.
That's definitely...
I won't disagree with you.
No, and probably wise. Thank you so much for coming in, Jacob Sackle, activist, youth and community strategist, Sophia Worringer, political commentator, and my little elf as well. And